Hi folks, welcome back to the Tabletop's Edge and the next episode in our World of Flames Days of Decision combined campaign playthrough. Today we're going to wrap up the year 1939 with the November-December turn, and 1939 has been by far the most eventful year of the game thus far. We saw the Spanish Civil War take a decisive turn in favor of the nationalists. There was a brief border skirmish between the Soviets and Japanese as the Japanese invasion of China continues to grind on at a slow but steady pace. And perhaps the biggest occurrence was the Commonwealth and France declaring war on Germany following Germany's invasion of the Netherlands. And by the end of last turn, Germany has in fact conquered the Netherlands. So, looks like this end of the year, we've got a number of things going on all over the globe. Typically, we get bad weather in November, December, so I don't expect this to be necessarily a long turn or have a lot going on with it, but everything that does go on here is obviously in preparation for the coming spring when the return of good weather and long turns is going to set up a what looks to be a very interesting, I think, clash there in Northwest Europe between Germany and the Western Allies. So let's just get right to it and we'll jump in with our political phase. Looking at the political initiative track, you can see where all of the major powers were last turn in order. We have a number of major powers bidding for political options this turn. That's not necessarily because they're looking to do something new, but because they have to bid in order to play the reaction options that they did in September, October, and now here in the actual political phase itself. And we had Germany and Italy both bidding 1, along with the Commonwealth. France bid 2. And the way this is going to shake out is we've got Germany's going to get a +2 for her position last turn for a total of 3. The Italians are going to get +3 to their one bid for 4. The Commonwealth is also going to get +3 for their bid of 1 for 4. And 4 is in fact going to be the highest. The French bid 2, and they actually, whoops, I think we've got those mixed up. France bid 2, they were getting +2 from their 5th position from last turn, which gives them a total of 4 as well. However, the French are going to be doing 2 political options this political phase, which means those that bid total then is split among both of those options, and it becomes essentially a 2 for France. So the top 2 bids were 4 for the Commonwealth and 4 for the Italians. You can see the Commonwealth here has a higher political effectiveness than Italy, so the Commonwealth is going to slide into first, and then the Italians are going to move up 1 into the 2nd position. Then coming in 3rd with a total of 3 is Germany. France, the final active bidder, with a net bid of 2, again because of the 2 options she's going to be playing, falls in 4th. So of the 4 remaining non-bidding powers, the Soviet Union's going to have a +4 here for a total of 4. That'll put them down here in 5th. And then in 6th, we've got Japan, then the United States, and then finally China staying at the bottom there. The U.S., I think, wanted to play a political option this turn, but was dissuaded from doing so by the Commonwealth. So we'll see what that's all about probably in the next turn or 2. But we've got our initiative order set for here. Should be no surprise as to what most of these options are going to be. We are going to start off with the Commonwealth, so we'll get right to that. Well, no surprise here. Commonwealth is playing Commonwealth option 4. It's war for their declaration of war on Germany. This was expensive. As you can see, it cost 8 +1 for the bid for a total of 9 build points. What I have not done yet is resolve the minor modifiers here, the effects on the minors, as well as the U.S. entry. So I'll go ahead and take care of those, and then we'll activate a minor country and see if we get any movement over on the status display. Well, having implemented the minor effects for the Commonwealth Declaration of War on Germany, the Commonwealth is perhaps a little surprisingly wildly unpopular with a number of minor countries all over the globe, particularly in Scandinavia. So perhaps the German diplomatic offensive that they've been undertaking at the beginning of the game is starting to pay dividends there, but neither Norway, well, the Commonwealth has -6 influence in Norway, -6 in Sweden, and -4 in Finland. So no friends in the north for the Commonwealth. And it's that way in, like I said, a number of countries. Turkey is sitting at -8. Where they do have some influence, however, is Portugal, where they're sitting at +8. But they also have some positive influence in Yugoslavia, along with the French. So I think what the Commonwealth is going to do is activate Yugoslavia and see if this might be enough to nudge the Yugoslavs into the Democrat sphere of influence. So let's head over to the status display and see how it plays out. Here we are looking at the status display, and you can see the Yugoslav marker is located right here, just outside the Democrat ideology, and more importantly, just 1 hex away from France here, who's sitting in the Social Democrat faction within that ideology. So if the influence markers, which we have here, are played correctly, we might be able to get Yugoslavia into the same hex as France, which would then potentially allow France to have Yugoslavia join in the war, essentially aligning them just like they did with Belgium. That could open a southern front then that the Germans would have to worry about. So let's see how this is going to work out. Remember, the Commonwealth activated the minor, so the Commonwealth can choose the order in which the 4 influence markers are played. And we have Italy with -2, Germany with -3, France with +3, and the Commonwealth with +3. Yugoslavia currently has an alliance with France and an alliance with the Soviet Union over here. So that's going to play a little bit of a role in how this influence gets expended. I think the Commonwealth is going to start by playing the 3 Commonwealth influence. Now, normally it would cost 2 for the marker to move closer to the Commonwealth. However, we're crossing a border here from the neutral zone into a faction of an ideology, so that's going to add +1 to that for a total of 3. However, because of the alliance with the Soviet Union, it's going to cost an extra 1 to move away from a country with which the minor is allied. They do have an alliance with France, and it costs 1 less to move towards a major power with which you have an alliance. However, they would be moving from 1 hex away to 1 hex away, so that would not come into play here. So with the 3 influence that the Commonwealth has, by moving, they don't have enough. They would need 4 to actually move into the ideology across that border there. However, the next influence that the Commonwealth is going to resolve is the +3 French influence. And this is going to be very similar. In fact, it's going to be exactly like the last resolution, the last chit, except for the fact that now they would be moving closer to France. So it's 2 base cost, +1 to cross the border, plus another 1 to move away from the Soviets is 4, but it's -1 from that because they're moving towards major power with which they have an alliance, which leaves them with 3, a cost of 3, and that is exactly how much influence France had. So far we have succeeded in getting the marker into the space. Is it going to stay there with the Axis influence? Sorry, the fascist influence resolution. Italy's a -2. That would seek to push Italy into either of these 2 hexes. It's a base cost of 2. They would be moving away from the Allied major power. They'd also be leaving a hex occupied by a major power that can control the minor, which is an additional +1. So it would cost 4 to get this marker to move into this hex. So the Italian -2 is essentially wasted, and you'll see the same thing here for the German -3. So after resolving the influence there, the Allies have in fact managed to pull Yugoslavia not only into the Democrat ideology here and into the Social Democrat faction along with France, but actually into the hex where the French marker is located, which again is one of the major prerequisites for being able to align the minor in WIF terms at some point later on and have them join the war. So overall, I think a fairly successful play, diplomatic play for the Allies. That is going to do it for the Commonwealth's political option. So now we're going to move on to the Italians, and the Italians are the only one of the 4 that bid this turn that did not do some sort of declaration of war last turn. So we'll see why the Italians bid and what they're trying to do. Actually, before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and roll to see if the political phase ends. It's going to take a 1 on the die in order to do that. I don't think that would make anybody else happy at this point. So here we go. Anything but a 1 to keep the phase going. Ha! Look at that. It is indeed a 1. So that is going to bring an early end to the political phase. And that's going to make France, Germany, and Italy not terribly happy because they still have these options that they need to play hanging over their heads. So for now, we will wrap up this very brief political phase and move on to rolling initiative, rolling the weather, and seeing what reinforcements everybody's getting this turn. For the initiative, the Democrats were able to overcome being in the -1 box with the Communists in the +2 box to win the initiative outright, and they have chosen to go first. The fascists actually also rolled well, but not quite as well as the Democrats, and they have elected to go last, which will put the Communists in the 2nd position in initiative for this turn. Now for weather, despite me talking about how bad the winter weather is, the weather roll was actually a 3, which gives us just rain in the Arctic. So ironically, the weather at least at the start of November, December is actually better than it had been for most of September, October. The impulse marker will go up 2 boxes on the track after each of the impulses, however. So with initiative and weather out of the way, we're ready to take a look and see what the reinforcements look like, and we're looking at this wedge of the circle this turn. As you can see, it's starting to fill up here as more nations concentrate their build points on units rather than political options, and we'll just sort some stuff out here, pull some ships off. The United States, as you can see, they got a very good light cruiser in the USS Savannah, and the USS Maryland battleship will both be going on map. The Commonwealth received the Victorious, the Queen's transport, fast transport, and the Liverpool heavy cruiser that are going on map. They also will be getting the HMS Cleopatra, looks like an anti-aircraft light cruiser that'll be going into the construction pool. Finally, the Japanese are getting the Chitose light aircraft carrier that'll go on map. The Commonwealth also getting their obligatory convoy point for the turn. The Soviets are getting just a big pile of reinforcements. They're getting an armor corps, they are getting Timoshenko HQ, and then they're getting all of the units from the Far East that were in Manchuria. So that's going to be another infantry corps, infantry army, cavalry corps, mechanized army, another infantry army, Zhukov, and a cavalry division. So as you can see, this is quite the stack here for the Soviets. It'll be interesting to see where they decide to deploy all of these units, and that'll be kind of a good clue as to what their near-term goals are going to be. Moving on, the Japanese get a good for 1939 carrier plane with a 4 air-to-air value and a 4 range. I'll put that in the reserve pool for now. They're also going to get a pilot. I'll mark him on the track. That's going to give them a total of 4 available pilots. So there's a pretty good chance we're going to see the A6M20s they just got actually appearing on one of their carriers there. The Germans, they are going to also receive a pilot. That's going to increase their available pilots to 3. I suspect we will see those pilots going into aircraft here momentarily. The Italians get a fighter. The Germans get an infantry division and a very good Bf-109. The Soviets, in addition to all their land units, are going to be getting a fighter, which will go again into the reserve pool for now. I'll go ahead and place these other aircraft in the reserve pool, and then off camera I'll go ahead and figure out which, if any of those, will be placed as reinforcements. The Belgians get a fighter, and this French pilot is actually the Belgian pilot that goes along with that fighter. So that fighter will end up going on map in Belgium. Let's see, the Republicans are getting, Spanish Republicans are getting a cavalry corps, which they will need. There are some militia here, the Kunming militia for China. The French are getting the Bordeaux militia, and the Germans are getting the Stettin militia to go with that infantry division, and probably at least one new aircraft. The Chinese have built a pilot, which is interesting, and we'll see if they have any aircraft to put that in here shortly. They're also getting a nationalist cavalry division and an infantry army, so a pretty good turn for the Chinese as far as reinforcements go, and it's one that that they really need. Now the U.S., the French, the Commonwealth, and the Soviets, all 4 of those powers are going to be getting pilots. That's going to increase the Commonwealth to 4. The Soviets have 3 available. The U.S. has 2, and the French, if I can find their marker, they now have 2 pilots available. So we'll get rid of those. The nationalists, they get a single-engine fighter. I'll put that in a reserve pool, but they do have a pilot that is available to be placed in that. The French, in addition to the Bordeaux militia, should be able to place the Metz militia as well. If you recall, last turn, this was one of their reserves. Metz was overstacked, and they did not have the ability to bring it on map at that time, but I think they'll be able to bring it on now. These Hungarians shouldn't be in here because they are still at peace. The Dutch militia is removed from the game since it was being conquered, but the NEI militia will go over in Batavia on the map. So that's going to wrap up the reinforcements for everyone, barring the addition of some aircraft, and there will be several aircraft coming out of the reserve pool at this point. I'm going to go ahead and deploy the reinforcements, and then I think we'll go ahead and dive right in with the first Democrat impulse. With the reinforcements placed, we are now ready to begin with the first Democrat impulse. The French and Chinese will be doing land impulses. The United States, because they're still neutral, is required to do a combined impulse. And the Commonwealth is going to be doing a naval impulse. Now, the big question for the Democrats in Europe is what to do here about Liège. Obviously, their primary concern right now, at least, is to stiffen and strengthen their defense line here in the east against the Germans. The Germans probably have a bit of a qualitative edge compared to France and the Commonwealth on the ground right now. And the Democrat strategy, I think, is probably going to be one of maybe like a counterblow, absorbing the initial German attack, and then once that's bogged down and they've managed to inflict some casualties on the Germans, then try to counterattack and push the Germans back into Germany, perhaps liberate the Netherlands along the way. And in the meantime, they are going to rely on their productive capacities to outbuild the Germans and really kind of alter that balance of power. And if they get to the point where they can do that, then they may not wait for a German attack, and they'll just go ahead and launch an offensive of their own. But they're not strong enough to do that yet. And so their first step is to try to establish an in-depth, strong defense against any possible German attack. And the front line, as you can see, runs along here. There's this little Liège salient, and then back along the line here. Currently, the Belgians are holding Liège with a cavalry corps and an infantry corps with a total of 7 defense strengths. Now, they do have a river on these 3 hex sides. But as you can see, the Germans are able to attack the hex from 4 different hexes and can probably bring quite a bit of firepower to bear, even though these 3 hexes are potentially halved with their attack strength. So do they hold on to the city, which is also, I believe, a factory? Yes, there's one factory there in Liège. Do they try to hold on there and make the Germans attack, even though the Germans likely can bring an overwhelming force, or do they look to pull back from there, rearrange the line here, thicken it a bit, maybe start to provide a second line of defense here behind that? So that's what the French and Commonwealth are really kind of trying to decide now. And I think what they're going to do is they probably are going to go ahead and pull back. As much as I hate giving up a factory, the Germans won't be able to use the factory because it's a blue factory. I hate to give up a city and a factory here, but I think ultimately it will make the position here in Belgium stronger for it, and we won't just be throwing away Allied units this early on in the conflict. Other than that, the French, again, they've got their reserves face up now, so they'll be rushing them forward into better positions and just kind of making some adjustments there. Don't see any real offensive action occurring this impulse. So like I said, the Luftwaffe does have a kind of a quantitative and a bit of a qualitative advantage, although with the RAF fighters on the continent here, it's not as large as you normally see at this stage of just a plain World in Flames game. So what I'll do, rather than make you sit through me just kind of fiddling around with the stacks here and moving troops in, I'll go ahead and probably cut away and pick up once at the end of the Democrats' impulse. As far as the Commonwealth is concerned, they have a couple of carriers here that are currently part of the home fleet, but they're going to be sending them southward, I think, to join the Mediterranean fleet. They still have a few carriers left in the home fleet just to give them some kind of at least minimal air-to-sea capability should the Germans decide to try to sortie again. But the home fleet strength is going to be its surface combat factors with all those old, slow battleships. They also placed the Liverpool and the Queens here in Plymouth. The Liverpool will most likely be escorting the Queens out, and seeing as they are fast transport, they will be sending them, I think, to pull in some reinforcements from the Commonwealth, namely the Sydney militia on the other side of the world. So a naval impulse it will be for the Commonwealth. Again, they also have some more troops available to move in their reserves, for instance, that they can move into the continent here to help bolster the defenses. So they'll be getting some troop convoys out to sea in the North Sea. They'll also be looking to cover various sea zones in case German raiders decide to sortie again. So I'll take care of all of the naval moves for the Commonwealth, and again, the Commonwealth and France will go ahead and pay the full oil cost to fully fuel all of their troops. In this particular instance, for the Commonwealth naval, it's going to cost them 12/10 oil, and for the French, it's going to cost them, for their land impulse, it's only going to cost them half that, 6/10 of an oil. So back in a few minutes, I'll kind of briefly go over the kind of review what exactly was done here, and then we'll probably hop over to Asia and take a look at the Chinese impulse. Well, at the end of the first Democrat impulse, you can see the French here have managed to withdraw from Liège, and they've shifted more and more of their troops here from the Maginot area up to the north and the west. They have managed to get a second line of defense everywhere except just west of Brussels here. So they are feeling a little bit better, but they still prefer not to have one of their headquarters here in the front line. And they still have units moving up. They have the Paris militia here, the Lyon militia. They railed the Bordeaux militia over to Lyon down here. They will either help watch the Italians down here in southern France, or they'll move up into probably the Maginot area in here somewhere to allow a little better unit to get deployed where they anticipate the German drive to come through. So not a lot happening. They did rebase some fighters here a little bit further east, again, where they think they will be able to reach more of the front line or potential invasion hexes when the Germans eventually come. So the Commonwealth did deploy the home fleet there in the North Sea. They have more troops bound for the continent here, being escorted by HMS Barham. They have a small task force here headed by HMS Repulse watching the Faroes Gap. They've got some aircraft deployed here in the Bay of Biscay, and then further south here in Cape St. Vincent, they have Force H, which is sortied from Gibraltar to meet the two carriers that are heading into the Mediterranean area. And HMS Warspite sailed from Alexandria, left the Med Fleet. It's a little bit slower than all of the other ships currently in the Mediterranean fleet, and I think they're just looking to redeploy that. They'll probably replace it with something like HMS Hood, maybe HMS Repulse, to allow the Mediterranean fleet to be a little quicker and be able to react and cover more sea area. That's going to do it for the European Democrats. The Spanish Republicans, they did they go when the French go. They received that cavalry corps as a reinforcement just southeast of Valencia, which was the only hex it could go into. And they really have nothing to do here other than just hunker down and await the coming nationalist assault. Hopefully, the next nationalist assault will not be anywhere near as successful as the one last turn. So that's going to leave us over here in China, where we will see what the Chinese do, taking advantage of getting the jump on the Japanese this turn. Well, it's a good thing for the Chinese that the Democrats did roll well enough to win the initiative this turn. They placed the Kunming militia reinforcements here in Kunming. They placed the infantry army down here in Canton and the cavalry division here. And having one initiative, this is going to allow them to make some adjustments to their defensive line. It's now basically good weather everywhere in China this impulse, so I don't think the Japanese are going to let that go to waste, and the Chinese are going to need to try and strengthen whatever they consider to be the weak points of their line. They will certainly slide the infantry army up here, give them a decent anchor down here. It is along the coast, and if you've played much World in Flames, you know that Chinese units along the coast are indeed pretty vulnerable given the Japanese naval superiority. Although I don't think they've got too much to worry about maybe at the moment, as one of the Japanese Marine Corps are located here further north on the mainland. But still, given the ability of the Japanese to combine a land attack with a naval invasion, and including the shore bombardment, generally Chinese troops that find themselves on the coast don't find themselves there very long. The cavalry division, we may just Changsha is a pretty important city for the Chinese, so we may leave the division there. The other option may be to maybe move it in here into the forest to strengthen that. Yeah, maybe we'll do that. it's not much. The Japanese can only attack from a single hex, but with just one unit there, it is easy to clear a hex defended only by a single unit. Technically, we should have railed the Kunming militia wherever we were going to have railed them, which is nowhere, but we will move them into the mountains there. Other than that, I think, let's see, Chang is up here in Wuhan. He's content to stay there. Then it'll be the communists after the fascists. So I think that's going to do it for the Chinese first impulse here. They were able to add quite a bit of strength down here to the southern end of their line, and the Japanese are fairly thin down here in the southern sector, although that's subject to change fairly quickly in good weather. So we'll see what the Japanese do. That's going to wrap it up, like I said, for the Democrats' first impulse. The impulse marker is going to move up 2 boxes on the track, and we will go over to the communists next. So I think what we'll do is maybe stay here in China and see if the Chinese communists do anything. Really, there's nothing nothing they're really looking at doing right now. They really rather they like to beef up Lan Chao here, and maybe, I don't know, do they want to move Mao into the front line there? Lan Chao is covered by river hex sides there, so yeah, you know what, let's just go ahead and slide him up there for now. And I think that's going to do it for the Chinese communists. Now we'll take a look and see what the Soviets are going to do, and kind of show you where they ended up placing their reinforcements they received this turn. Well, as you can see, the Soviets placed the bulk of those reinforcements right here along the Caspian. They pulled with one of their pilots, they pulled these strategic bombers out of the reserve pool. You can see they put Zhukov and the cavalry corps here in Baku, and further north here in Astrakhan they put the mech corps, the mechanized army, the tank army, and the cavalry division there in Astrakhan to bring them down. And the infantry, the 2 infantry armies are over here in Grozny, which puts them right on the edge of the map here. They are adjacent actually to this hex side 23, so you can see they'll be either moving or railing in this turn. Obviously, this is going to presage an attack here on Iran at some point in the probably not too distant future. It's not going to happen, I think, this turn. The Soviets, being neutral, are still restricted to a combined impulse, so it's going to take them a little while to get the forces they need in place here to make an invasion, a successful invasion of Iran. But I think that's primarily what we can expect to see from the Soviets moving forward into maybe the first half of 1940. Timoshenko arrived here in Odessa. They still have a little bit of a buildup going on the Romanian border. Whether they decide to try to conquer Iran first or try to do these things simultaneously. The big question is, if they go after Romania, are they going to be going after Romania in a full-scale sense in order to just try and outright conquer the minor country, or will it be the equivalent of a border rectification under the WiFCE rules, where they're looking to they'll be happy just to grab the Bessarabian territory? So again, those are questions that are probably going to have to wait until spring of 1940 to be fully answered. But we've taken a look at what the Soviets are up to. Since there's, again, nothing offensive that's really going to happen here, I'll go ahead and just take care of what should be a quick move off camera. We'll pick up, I'll show you what they've managed to do as far as their deployment with regards to Iran, And then I think that's it for the communists, and that'll bring us on to the fascist, where I would expect to see a little bit more activity given the good weather. Well, as expected, not much to see in the way of Soviet impulse. They do get 5 land moves in a combined. However, one of those land actions was consumed by Mao when he moved over there in China. So that left them with 4 land moves, 3 of which they used to bring the mechanized cavalry force down from Astrakhan, a couple of hexes, and then with the last one they pushed Zhukov west out of Baku. One mistake that the Soviets kind of made here was their reinforcements. You can see they also rebased their previously on-map long-range bomber from Kiev here to Grozny, but the infantry reinforcements really should have come in here at Tiflis, which would have put them in a better position to come onto the map, the Asia map here. So the decision is whether or not we're just going to march them down to Tiflis and then over, or if we just rail them slowly into Baku as space becomes available there. They do only get one combined, or one rail move in a combined impulse, but they're only looking at moving a couple units in, so they can probably rail them into Baku this turn if they really desire to do that, and it will probably get them there faster than marching them down to Tiflis and then onto the map. So again, not much to see from the communists. The impulse marker is going to go up 2 boxes yet again. There's still no chance for the turn to end, which means we are on to the fascists, and I think maybe we'll start with the Japanese in Asia, since we're kind of on the Asia-Pacific maps here, and then we'll save the European fascists for last. Now, if you recall, the Japanese declared war on China using Japanese political option number 6, which reduced the U.S. entry hit for declaring war on China, but as a consequence, they're restricted to kind of a limited war type of situation for, I think it's the first 12 turns or so. What that means is they are restricted to choosing combined impulses only. Now, if you're wondering when that restriction ends, it will be lifted at the beginning of the March-April 1940 turn. So we are coming up on it here. We've got this turn and next turn, and then the Japanese will be free to select land impulses or naval impulses, the same as any of the other major powers that are currently at war with another major power. So with that in mind, they are doing a combined impulse. They do get 2 naval moves as a result, and they're going to bring this convoy or transport into the 0 box. They're going to basically load up the Marines there from the shore, and to make sure they've got a little bit of protection, we're also going to park a battleship here from the combined fleet with them. They're not going to pay the oil cost to fully fuel this particular impulse, since they're not going to move that many oil-dependent units. They do get the first one for free, so that will cost them 1/10 for the battleship. And that's going to do it for their 2 naval moves. As we move on in the turn, the Japanese, the way the weather zone are set up here in China, you've got the North Monsoon, and then you have the North Temperate covering the bulk of the country. And what tends to happen is when the weather's bad in North Temperate, it's good down here in the south, and then when it's good or when it's bad in the south, it tends to be good in the north. So the Japanese tend to either be, depending on the turn and the time of year, tend to be attacking either on one side of their line or the other. And if you're not careful as a Japanese player, you can get caught with the bulk of your forces sort of in the wrong place at the wrong time, and then it takes so long to move anywhere on the Pacific maps because of the hex scale that you can really get caught in the trap of shifting troops from the bad weather theater into the good weather theater, only to get them there in time for the good weather to turn to bad weather, and it's good weather where they just left. So until the Japanese have built up a big enough army in China to where they can launch assaults basically on either end of the line simultaneously, that's something you want to be aware of and not fall into that trap, which means you got to kind of think ahead a few turns. And even though the weather's bad, if you're going to want to be shifting troops, you need to do that before a couple of turns before you're going to need them, before the weather actually gets good in the destination sector. This particular impulse, they're fortunate in that the weather is good everywhere, but it's probably not going to stay that way. And moving forward, they anticipate the best weather to be down here in the south. So this is their best area, best opportunities for advancement over the next couple of turns. But as you can see, they're not real strong down here. They've got a few more units a little bit further north. They could make an attack this impulse somewhere up here where they've got a little more firepower. The terrain in China is not very good really anywhere. There are 3 key cities along the current front lines for the Chinese. We've got Chengzhou here, held by Mao and the communists at the southern end of their line. We have Wuhan with Chang, and then Changsha. And the Japanese obviously would like to take all of those and drive further west here, ultimately reaching the Chongqing Plateau here, where they should be able to, if they can reach this section and take Lanchao, that'll put them in a real good position for taking all of the factories, because in order to conquer China, they have to capture Chongqing and they have to control all of the factories, the printed factory hexes in the country. So what that means immediately for them is they really aren't going to be able to get anybody down here, this impulse, in a position to attack. I think what they're going to do, they have a grand total of 3 land moves in a combined impulse. And I think they're going to go ahead and have Yamamoto move out, and they'll have this infantry army move up here in Nanking. And I think that may, well, you know what, is he gonna, he'll stay there. Yeah, that's fine. That guy's fine there too, I suppose. We've got a couple of units here sort of off the front lines acting as garrisons to counter any potential partisan activity that might show up. China has a very high partisan number of 20, which unless you've got a super high garrison ratio, which is unlikely to be the case, there's a really good chance that if China gets, if you roll on the partisan table and China is on that line, that China is going to get at least 1, perhaps 2 partisan units showing up in the country. And they can cause all kinds of headaches. As you can see, there's a red factory here. There's some resources back there. I've found that the most effective way to deal with partisans or prevent partisans in China for the Japanese, particularly when they don't have much beyond this eastern coastal region, is to basically get a zone of control exerted into any potential partisan placement hex, which then will prevent the partisans from showing up in the first place. We're not quite there yet. The partisan, they can still place a partisan here, but that's not going to be a big deal. As long as we've got our factories and resources and rail lines covered, that should be good enough for now. Obviously, we'd like to completely zock out any potential Chinese partisans that are going to show up, but that's going to require the Japanese building a lot more land units. What these moves do now, though, is maybe put us in a position as the Japanese to attack this single 14th Chinese army here. They are in the mountains, which is unfortunate, but the Japanese can bring a total of, let's see, that's 14 and 14 is 28, 29 with the cavalry, 35 with the infantry army there. 35 to 8 is going to be a 4 to 1. I don't know if we want to try and it's a 1 in 10 chance to get a successful ground strike with the bombers there, and I don't think that's worth the oil cost, frankly. So the other question is, do we have Yamamoto provide some offensive HQ support, which would in fact give us a +1, even if Chang, who would be eligible to provide defensive HQ support, even if Chang were to do that, his 1 subtracted from Yamamoto's 4 still leaves 3. Divide that by 4, it gives you 0.75. That rounds up to +1 anyway. So we can basically guarantee ourselves a 4-to-1 +1, probably on the assault, just since that's what the Chinese have been doing so far, making the Japanese pay for their conquest hex by hex. And they've been, frankly, I think, reasonably successful with that, because in many cases we've seen all of the Japanese attacking units turn face down, which was usually good enough to bring the Japanese offensive for that turn to an end and limit the speed with which they've been able to overrun eastern China. So I would expect the Chinese to do the same here again. A +1 would guarantee that the Japanese do take the hex. So you know what? Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Even though this is going to turn Yamamoto down at the end of the battle, we'll go ahead and do that. Again, this is probably going to be a short turn based on expected weather. And you know, I keep saying that, which means I'm going to jinx myself into a really long good weather turn here in November, December, but we'll see what happens. We'll go ahead and make that attack. It's going to end up being a 4-to-1 +1 on the assault. And the Chinese, again, they're choosing the assault because if they go on the blitz, there's a 10% chance that the unit would survive and simply retreat. However, there would be a 50% chance of all of the attacking units remaining face up. So again, sticking with their doctrine of trying to get the Japanese turned face down as quickly as possible in the turn, they're going to go on the assault table, where they have a better chance of at least getting half of those guys turned face down. So let's see what the result is of the attack here. It's a 3, which is not a real good roll. +1 becomes a 4. And you know, quite frankly, it's going to be no losses to the Japanese, which is good for the Japanese. 1 loss to the Chinese, which we knew was going to be the minimum loss. But all of the attackers are in fact turned face down. So the Chinese managed to again trade some lives for time, and the 14th Army is destroyed. The Japanese take no losses. However, they will be able to occupy the hex, and I think we're going to have both Yamamoto and the militia move into the mountain hex, because anyone except for the cavalry division entering that hex would have been turned face down anyway. And I think maybe we'll even add the cavalry division there, but then those 5 units are turned face down. That's really going to sort of gut the center of the Japanese offensive capabilities. They don't really have much here in the south. The weather, if the weather stays good, they might be able to do a little mischief up here in the north, but I think the Chinese would say that they are reasonably satisfied. They're not happy with having lost the unit nor that mountain hex, but I think they're at least satisfied that their strategy appears to be working, such as it is. They should be able, hopefully, to fill now this gap here. And again, there's no real rush or danger because of the face down units there. They're not going anywhere for this turn. All right, that's going to wrap up the Japanese first impulse, and we're going to go over now to Europe and see what's happening over there. Well, as usual in Europe, we are going to start in sunny Spain. The nationalists operating under the Italian action limits, the Italians being neutral or restricted to a combined impulse. The Italians really don't have anything to do. I think they're really just kind of waiting for some more troops to show up on board for for them to actually do something with, which has worked out to the nationalist advantage because they've been able to take pretty much all of the action limits that that the Italians have available each turn. Now with the combine, that only does give them 3 land moves. There's no naval movement, no rail movement to speak of, so we can go right into the land moves, and with the 3 they are going to they're going to have Franco move here. They're going to bring the artillery unit up as well. That's 2. And then they're going to slide the Cartagena militia here in the mountains over onto the coast. I don't think they are quite happy with the attack that they have here right now. The defenders currently have 2 units with a total defense strength of 8. They are in the mountains, which means that's a 16, which the nationalists would prefer to try to get something on the 2-to-1, like a 2-to-1 plus 1, preferably 2-to-1 plus 2, maybe even plus 3. But I think it's going to take them another impulse to get the units they need where they need them to be in order to do that. They're also going to use an air mission to rebase the newly arrived fighters down where they are now within range of just about all of the Republican units in the Valencia pocket. So that's going to do it for the nationalists. A quick impulse here. We're anticipating, probably assuming the weather holds, next impulse for the fascists. We'll probably see an attack here. There's really not much the nationalists are able to do other than commit maybe some defensive HQ support in the event that happens. So we'll see what happens next turn. Probably a little more action going on down there in Spain. That leaves us with just the Germans. And now to the main event, as it were. For those of you with some World in Flames experience, I think you would agree that this is a little bit different situation than Germany is faced with in most just standalone WiFCE games. In the global war scenario, in just a plain WiFCE game, the Germans are generally able to declare war on Belgium and grab at least a chunk of the country, usually enough to eliminate the Belgian army itself before the Allies can react and get into the country. But you can see here, with the days of decision political aspects being added in, and the Allies able to get Belgium aligned with the French, they were able to basically make Belgium an active participant in the war before the Germans were able to make any kind of surprise invasion. And as a result, the Allies are able to start to form a line further to the east, and taking advantage of the Deal River here, as well as both Antwerp and Brussels. These are 2 cities which are important because those are hexes that are not available to be blitzed by the Germans. So they're going to have to kind of claw their way through them or figure out a way to somehow go around them. And while the Allies don't have necessarily an impregnable wall of troops here, they are starting to fill in depth, and the defense factors they do have in these hexes are enough, combined with the rivers that are in the area, to really deny the Germans good odds attacks. So the Germans are faced with a rather tough decision here. Obviously, they will move in and seize Liège since it's been evacuated, but they really don't have more than a 2-hex attack on any hexes on the Allied front, except for out here at Strasbourg, which is surrounded by the Maginot on 4 hex sides and the Rhine on 3 of them. So very difficult to get any kind of even mediocre attack against this particular hex. And at the far end of the line up here in Antwerp, they can get a 3-hex attack, but 2 of them are coming across river hex sides and the other one is across a crossing arrow. So everybody will be halved attacking into Antwerp, which is held currently by the BEF with a defense strength of 12, which is nothing to sneeze at. The Germans do have an advantage in the air. They've got more bombers. They've got a lot more bombers. And as far as fighters go, it's it's a little bit closer. I think they have the slight edge. They do have the only 6 on the map right now, and they will be getting 3 more air reinforcements in January, February. But of course, January, February, we can expect pretty poor weather, which is going to negate any air advantages that either side may have. So the Germans, really, they've got to decide, are they going to try to push now, or at least start to chip away, and if so, where? The one hex that they've been looking at here is Predelat's hex. It is a clear hex, as you can see. However, the Maas covers 2 hex sides, one of which the Germans would be attacking from. The other, they'd be coming in from Liège with no river. So they would at least get a full strength attack from this hex. They'd be halved coming from here. So basically they have a 1.5 hex attack against Predelat, who, you know, he's a 6, which is good, one of the best Allied units, if not the best French unit on the map right now. And they have the cavalry, the Belgian Cavalry Corps, which is only a 3, but that's good enough for a 9. What also you have to take into consideration is the fact that there is an artillery unit here, which can add its 2 in defense, and the 105s here can add 3. So really, we're looking at a defense of strength of 14 in that hex. And now, if you're the Germans looking at that, you're attacking a 14 strength hex, which will undoubtedly have defensive HQ support from Predelat, unless, of course, he gets turned face down by a ground strike somehow. And even if he's turned face down, they still have Georges here, which can provide 3. And I think the other HQ is down here. Yep, Biot is down there. He's out of range. But the Germans will be looking at attacking a 14 strength hex with defensive HQ support from 1.5 hexes max. They can get some help from the Luftwaffe, particularly now with the good weather. The Luftwaffe will come in full strength. The Luftwaffe will hopefully be able to turn both of those units face down with ground strikes. And it's a clear hex, so they would be able to access the blitz table if they brought some panzers along, which they certainly would. But it's not a great attack. If it goes poorly, which there probably is a good chance of that happening, the Germans are going to take some casualties, which they can't necessarily afford right now. They may not even take the hex, which would be really bad. And even if they do take the hex, the odds are excellent that most, if not all, of their troops are going to be turned face down as a result, which will kind of bring most of their offensive activity for this turn to a halt, just as we've seen it happen over in China with the Japanese. So it's kind of a dilemma for the Germans. If they wait a couple of turns, if they wait till the spring, say March, April, or maybe even May, June, to try and guarantee themselves a long turn of consecutive good weather impulses before they launch their attack, they're giving the Allies time to continue to build reinforcements and strengthen the line even more. And it'll get to the point, I think, certainly by the end of next summer, if the Germans don't do something here in the next 3 to 4 turns, I do think the Allies will be able to construct a defense that is so in depth that the Germans just won't be able to claw through it any faster than they could in 1914 to 1918. It's going to be very much an attritional World War I conflict here, which again is something that the fascists can't really afford in this game. So that being said, the Germans they're going to have to do something. The question is what, and do they take the risk? Now, the one thing I haven't mentioned yet is the offensive points that the Germans have. They currently have 15 offensive points, so that's enough for them to use the offensive points and give themselves a really good odds attack to take a hex, preferably one that would allow them to blitz through the hex and seize the target hex plus a hex beyond. That would allow them to punch a hole through the Allied line, but that's not going to happen if they attack here. because the Allies have units here. They have the artillery here. They may be able to, it's only a 2-strength artillery, so they might be able to overrun it, particularly if it's face down, having provided barrage. That's, again, there's a lot that goes into this calculation determination of what the Germans are going to do. And I'm going to probably have to sit and look this over for a while here. And once we've decided what the German course of action, at least for this impulse, is going to be, we'll go ahead and continue. I may just go ahead and do the impulse up to the point where something of interest may happen. If they end up making any attacks or anything along those lines, we'll obviously we'll cut back in at that point. If not, if they decide that waiting might be the better option, then it may pick this up at the end of their impulse. The fascists cannot end the turn this impulse, and I don't think the Democrats can end it on theirs. But after that, the turn could potentially end. And again, depending on the weather, it could end sooner rather than later. So let me have a think on this. And when we get it figured out, we will continue. Well, the die has been cast. The proverbial Rubicon has been crossed as far as the Germans are concerned. They knew they would find themselves at war with the Western democracies at some point, and now is as good a time as any. However, the Democrats being able to ally Belgium and bring them in as an active participant is a bit of a wrinkle for the Germans. And while it's certainly going to make things harder, potentially a lot harder here in their initial clash with the French and Commonwealth, they don't think it's necessarily a decisive development. What they are concerned about is allowing the Democrats 3 or 4 more turns to continue to build up and really make this line not only stronger along the front here, but deeper as well. With one of WiFCE's weakest points is trying to simulate or recreate the 1940 campaign in France. There's not really enough room at the WiFCE scale to do it justice, and it becomes very positional. It's in many ways it's a lot more like World War I on the Western Front than the France 40 campaign. But that said, this has a potential to devolve even more so into a very positional slugging match than you find in just a standard WiFCE game. So we'll see what happens here. Will the Germans get bogged down, or will they be able to overcome the current situation? The Germans certainly are not about to sit around and wait to find out. So they are going right in this impulse, and I think they're going to make some attacks here and try and crack this front before things get even more difficult for them. I talked a little bit about the balance of power in the air, and in fact, the Allies do outnumber the Germans in terms of fighter units by 1. The Allies combined have a total of 6 fighters here on the continent. The Germans only have 5 fighter units themselves. However, they do have a slight qualitative edge. They have the only 6 here. They have another 5 and a 4, whereas the best Allied fighter are the Spitfire 1s here with a 5, and then they've got a 3 4s, and it drops off to a 3, and then a twin engine 3, which actually is the Allies' best bomber. So it'll be interesting to see whether the French decide to commit that as a fighter bomber or in a fighter role. So it's not going to be easy in the air as well as on the ground, but to help things out and give them the best chance of getting off to a good start here, the Germans have decided to spend some offensive points this impulse. They are choosing a land action. That will be their impulse type for this impulse. They are spending offensive points to grant the land impulse benefits to one of their headquarters, which will be von Rundstedt, who is, I believe he's here. There he is. He is a 4, as you can see. Now the cost for that is going to be 5 plus twice Rundstedt's reorganization value, which is 4, so that's 8, and 5 is 13. That's going to take them from 15 offensive points down to 2. So I'll go ahead and record that here quickly. Now that that's taken care of, what this does, the effects are going to enable the Germans to double the combat factors of any attacking units that are within range of von Rundstedt if they make any overruns or attacks this turn, and that includes artillery units that are attacking as well. Now, if you're using an artillery unit to bombard, which is sort of the ground version of a ground strike with your aircraft, the artillery unit, if you decide to use the benefit for that, it's going to roll an extra dice. So it basically gives you the equivalent of the surprise effect for any artillery units. Now they can do that up to a number of units, double the headquarters reorganization value. So in this case, that means there'll be 8 units throughout the course of the turn that von Rundstedt will be able to double when they make any attacks. Now you can only double a unit once per individual attack. However, if a unit were to attack and then say maybe do an overrun, you could double it for the attack and then double it again for the overrun, but that would count as 2 of the 8 allowable uses this impulse. And then at the end of the impulse during the reorganization step, any land units that are reorganized only cost half the reorganization value. So conceivably, Rundstedt could reorganize up to 8 units. So with the decision made, this is probably going to be the most important or consequential impulse we've seen probably in the game so far. And I expect there will be even more important impulses down the road here. But for now, since the Germans are doing a land impulse, we're going to skip all of the naval stuff, and really there's no strategic bombardment. It brings us to the first thing we're actually going to be doing, and that is ground strikes. Now, the Germans get 4 air missions in a land impulse, and each ground striking aircraft counts against that limit. So we're going to fly the 5-strength Stukas 1, 2, 3 to the forest hex just southwest, and we'll also send the Dornier 17s along with them. And let's see, is it here, I believe? Nope, where'd they go? I know I've got a few more bombers here somewhere. Just have to find them. Where did they go? Here we go. We'll send the 4 there, and I thought we had a 3. Well, I guess he's going there. So we'll send the HE-111s down here. 1, 2. Let's send the HS-1, the Hunchel 1, 2, 3s. Send them down. There we go. Put our fighters back. Actually, these fighters are going to escort the bombers there because of their short range. And now it's up to the Allies to respond to see if they're going to intercept any of these missions. And I think they will decide to do so. This is why it's always best if you can have your fighters as close to the front, as close to the target hexes as possible, because the Germans, aside from the very short-ranged biplane fighters they have here, they're able to hold back the rest of their fighters to wait to see what the Allied reaction is, because then they will have an opportunity to intercept the interceptors, as it were, since they are all within half range of the fighters. So let's go ahead and see. This may take a minute for the Allies to figure it out. They've got 2 target hexes, each with a couple of bombers coming in to figure out how they want to try and intercept this. So I'm going to pause here, and I'll resume once the Allies get their interceptions figured out. All right, I've worked out all of the interceptions, including the Germans' interception of the interceptors, and we'll break it down and see what happened here. Now, in the northern hex here, which is where Predela is located, the Allies decided to send up the Spitfires and the MS-406s, and the Germans responded with their 109 E4s, the 109Bs, and the HE-112s. And in the southern hex, the Allies decided to lead with their Hawk 75s and also sent in the D510s, and the Germans responded with just the 109 E3s, the 5-strength 109s, and the biplane escorts, the Heinkel 51s. So what we'll do now is we'll need to resolve both of these air combats. So we'll pull all of the units out of this congested area here. I'll pull them off to the side. We can break it out, make it a little easier to follow, and we'll resolve these. I guess since I've got most of the stuff pulled off here, we'll do this northern one first, and then we'll resolve the other one. So meet back in a minute. Now, as you can see here, both sides have laid out their fighter and bomber streams for the upcoming combat. This is the largest air battle I think we've had to date in the game. The Allies have their front fighter as the Spitfire, with the MS-406 backing them up, and you can see the Germans' front fighter is going to be their 6-strength 109s, and the 2 fighters behind them. In the bomber stream, their front bomber is the Henschel 123 with the Stukas behind them. So as we're watching this, one of the conventions I'll use is the units that are closest to the enemy side are considered the front, either fighter or bomber. Now the totals, the air-to-air strength totals, it's still taking me a little to get used to the change that they made here in the collector's edition after all those years of playing and calculating it the other way. But it works out the same. So they have a front strength for the Allies, a front strength fighter of 5. To that is going to be added 0.4. Now in previous editions you would get 1 for each of your subsequent fighters so long as they weren't obsolete, which this would have been 6 calculated under the old way, but now it's 5.4. Now on the German side, we have 6 plus 0.4 plus 0.3 is the 6.7. We are going to, that would previously have been an 8. So under all the previous editions, this would have been a 6 strength versus an 8 strength. But now, in the collector's edition, this becomes 5.4 to 6.7. We subtract the 5.4 from the 6.7, and we end up with a differential of 1.3. Now that is going to round down, and it's going to put the Germans on the +1 column and the Allies on the -1 column. And in each round of combat, the results are implemented simultaneously. The defender, or the non-phasing player, rolls the dice first. So the Allies are going to roll first. We'll see what they do here with their first shot, and it's going to be a good one. Not a great one, but it is going to be pretty good, I think. It's a 4. The air combat is a 2d10 table, so a 4, cross-referencing that with a -1 column, is a DX. So that's a defender destroys front fighter or front bomber. Now this, so they're off to a good start here. The Germans, I think, are going to, they do have to make this decision before they in turn roll. They are going to destroy the Henschels there, and now they're going to return the favor here on the +1 column. We'll see if they can roll something matching that, and not quite. I don't think it's a real bad roll, but it's a 14 total. Now on the +1, is that going to be enough? I don't think it's going to be enough to shoot anything down. It is a DA, which is a defender aborts front fighter or front bomber. So since there are no bombers to consider, the Allies are going to have to abort the Spitfires, and we've come to the end of the first round of combat. Now the one quick note on the bombers that were shot down: because it was a green boxed result instead of a yellow or red boxed result, the pilot will survive for the Germans. So that's at least a little something. But now each side has to decide whether they are going to continue the fight or if they're just going to abort everyone back to base. Now the Germans still have not managed to get a bomber through. They have seen a considerable improvement in the air-to-air strength now, so the Germans are going to stay in the fight. The Allies, let's see, what would it be exactly? Well, it'd be 6.7 to 4. That's going to be a differential of 2.7, which is going to bring us to round up to +3 -3, and the French would have to roll a 15 or better, or a 6 or less to do anything, to do even abort one of the Germans. Whereas, what are they risking out here? We said that was a +3, 6.7. 2 point, yep, +3 columns. That's a +2, +3 column. Again, if the Germans end up rolling that same 15 or 6, I'll actually shoot the fighter down. This is a tough decision for the Allies. Do they risk the fighter here in an attempt to turn back the Stukas or even the German fighters? You know what? They were on a roll. They're gonna stick around for a second round and see how it goes. So they're up first, rolling on the -3 column, and if they get another low roll like that last time, this one's not a bad roll, kind of on towards the other end of the spectrum. It's a 16, which is going to be enough to be a -3. That is a they just missed it. It's a DA result, so that's going to be defender aborts, front fighter, or front bomber. If the Germans choose to abort the Stuka, which is now the front bomber because the Henschels were shot down last round, that's going to basically prevent any of the bombers from getting through. So I think the Germans are going to take a chance and they will abort their good fighter there. But they do get a roll here on the +2, +3 column, and if they can just get those pesky 406s to leave, they'll be in good shape. I don't know that that's going to happen with a 13, though. So a 13 on the +2, +3. Actually, it is a DA. They just barely managed to abort them. So those are aborted. And the combat will end now because there are no aircraft remaining on the Allied side. It was a reasonably successful encounter, I think, from the Allied standpoint. They managed to shoot down a bomber, which is going to cost the Germans, and they managed to turn back half of the incoming bombers. So I think the Allies can live with that, especially having taken no losses. What I'll do here is return all of these aircraft to base, face down, except, of course, for the Henschels, which are going back into the force pool, and I'll increase the pilots available on the track for the Germans, and then we will go ahead and resolve the next air-to-air combat. And here we are set up for the second air battle. I'd have to say round one goes to the Allies, I think, at least so far. This battle, we're looking at 4.3 for the Allied air-to-air strength versus a 5.3 for the Germans, so that's going to be a +1 for the Germans. The French will be rolling on the -1 column. Again, the Allies are the non-phasing players, so they will roll first, and they're looking to continue that hot streak. That's not a bad roll. It is a 7. On the -1, I think it's going to be enough. That's defender aborts, front fighter, or front bomber. And again, Germans are going to have to make a choice here. Do they think that they can take out one of these French fighters? If so, they can abort their fighter here, but I don't think they're going to take that chance. They're going to go ahead and have to settle for aborting their front bomber. And now the return shot from the Germans, and it's a pretty good one. So you can see with that 9 and 6, that's a 15. 15 on the +1 column is an AA. It's an attacker abort. They just missed shooting down the Hawks, so the lead French fighter will be aborted. Now we come to the beginning of round 2, or actually the end of round 1, to see if anybody is going to abort or if they're going to stick around for another round of combat. The air-to-air value has now changed. We're looking at a 3 to a 5.3. That's a 2.3 difference, which rounds to 2. So the French have slid one column to the left. The Germans have moved another column up to the right. They have one very powerful bomber remaining. Is it worth the French risking this fighter? And I think so. It's not a very good fighter. If they lose it, it's not really the end of the world. But they still have an opportunity to maybe turn back the Stukas and avoid any ground strikes whatsoever. So the French will once again hang out for another round. And this time they're going to roll not very good roll. It's a 13. And a 13 on the -2 is going to be an AC. That's the attacker clears through any one defending bomber. So the Stukas will, in fact, make it through to the attack, and we'll see if the Germans can add some injury to the insult And it looks like they're going to, because they got another good roll here of 16. This time they're on the +2 column, and I think that's going to be enough. It is. It's a DX. That is a defender, destroys, front fighter, front bomber. However, it's a yellow box, which means the pilot survives if shot down over friendly territory, which they are. So the old D510s are going back to the force pool. And actually, now that I think about it, these are not very good fighters. I think they're actually going to scrap these, but the French pilots do survive, and with that, there are no remaining Allied planes, which means this air combat now is over after round 2. Once again, half of the German bombers did not make it through, but the best of the German bombers in each case did make it through, and the Germans were at least able to even the tally in the air, having each side having shot down one opposing aircraft, but not killing any pilots. So I'll return the interceptors to base. We'll let the Stukas follow through with the ground strikes as well as the other ground strikes. So we'll meet back over on the maps. All right, back on the map here, you can see we've returned to base all of the fighters. We have our 2 remaining bombers that we will now resolve the ground strikes. We'll start with the Stukas here in Predelat's hex. There are 2 units here. I'll just go ahead and roll both dice at the same time. The red die will be the result against the French HQ. The green die will be against the Belgian cavalry unit. We're looking for a 4 or less in either case, so almost a 50% chance. And this is disappointing for the Germans in that they rolled 2 6s, so they miss both of their attempts here. We'll return the bomber to base, and now for the other Stuka here, we've got a fighter here who's already face down, so that won't be affected. We have the artillery unit and Georges, so again we'll just roll both dice at the same time. Now the tactical rating is a 5. However, we are in the forest, so it's halved to 2.5, which then rounds to 3. So we need a 3 or less. And again, the red die will be the top unit, the artillery unit, and the green die will be Georges himself. So looking for a 3 here. We'll see if the Germans can't roll a little lower this time. And they actually do not. They roll a 6 and a 7. So all of the ground strikes are completely ineffective for the Germans. And if my personal WiFCE historical record is any indication, this means we are probably looking at an extremely successful ground assault. It tends to be over the years that if I do very well in the air-to-air combat, shoot down a lot of enemy aircraft, then come in, have my ground strikes, invert everybody in the hex, everything's looking great, get a really nice attack going, and then I usually just blow it with a 1 or 2. So this time we've completely botched the air campaign. The Luftwaffe will have to go back and try and figure out a little better way to get things done, which means we're on to the rail movement and then land movement. The land movement is going to consist of a bit of a shuffling around here. So rather than have you sit through all of that little minutia, I'll go ahead and do all of the rail moves, which I don't think there are going to be any rail moves, at least not this impulse. I'll go ahead and take care of all the land moves, and then we will resume. There should be no air transport, no debarking of land units, invasions, or paradrops, which means then I'll go ahead and do the land movement, kind of let you know what happened, and we'll move right on to land combat. Having done all of the land movement and the other steps leading up to the land combat step, we are now at the land combat step, and the Germans have determined to make an attack here against Predelat's hex. And they're going to be attacking from the hex here and here. Now this hex is across a river. It's the Meuse River, so they will be halved, the units that are attacking across there. First thing we need to do is determine the combat odds, and we'll see what kind of strength the Germans are bringing. They've got 3 from the artillery, another 7 from Rundstedt is 10, and 9 from the infantry corps there, for a total of 19. Now remember, the Germans did use their offensive points and nominated Rundstedt as their headquarters that they will be effectively doubling. So he has 4 reorganization points. That's going to allow him to double the combat strength of up to 8 units in any attacks made this impulse. So he will be doubling the 3 units here as well as the 3 units attacking here across the river. Now, with these units being doubled, the 19 strength becomes a 38. Here we have a 2 strength division, an 8 strength motorized, and an 8 strength mechanized. So that's a total of 18 in that hex. However, they're going to be halved by attacking across the river, which drops them to 9, but then they are then doubled because of the offensive point expenditure from Rundstedt back to 18. So we have 38 plus 18 gives us a 56 for our attackers, and they are attacking a defensive strength of 9. So 56 to 9 is a 6-to-1 attack. I'm sorry, a 56 to 9, simple math. I should know this. Yes, it's going to be 6-to-1. 54 would be 6 times 9, so 6-to-1 attack right now. However, we still have a couple of other issues to go through. The Luftwaffe is as out of fighters, actually, so she does have a bomber here she could contribute to, but there's not really enough tactical factors remaining in the Air Force. They kind of shot their bolt there with the ground strike attempts, which turned into a miserable failure for them. So the Germans have no bombers they can bring in. The Allies, however, do have 2 aircraft here that are within range and would be able to contribute some defensive air support, and they are going to send this Amio 143 to add its 2 to the 9 that are there. That would make it an 11. And keep in mind, the Germans have also committed all of their fighters to escorting the ground strike bombers, so they have no fighters to intercept any of these ground support aircraft, which looks like it could be a big mistake, because the Allies, knowing that, are going to go ahead and send in the other aircraft as a fighter bomber, adding its 3. So now all of a sudden the defensive strength goes from 9 to 14. 14 to, we said, 56 drops the odds from 6-to-1, which would be really good, down to a 4-to-1. So now we also need to consider one other thing. 4-to-1 odds, and the Germans do have some mechanized units attacking and armor units, so they are going to be able to choose the table. They're going to choose the Blitzkrieg table, and even a 4-to-1 attack on the Blitzkrieg table is pretty good. The Allies can make that even worse by having their 75mm artillery here contribute its 2 factors as ground support as well. So we've got 2 from the artillery and 5 from air units. That gives us a total of 7. All of a sudden now it is a 56 to 16, which drops it even further now down to a 3-to-1 attack on the Blitzkrieg table. The last decision to be made by both sides is any HQ support. Will it be committed? And the Germans, now that they're looking at a 3-to-1 attack, are definitely going to have Rundstedt contribute offensive HQ support, which would give them a +1. So the Allies need to decide if they're going to have anyone committed in defensive support. Now, if they choose Predalot, who would be the preferable one, and I'll go ahead and rebase these aircraft because there won't be any combat or any opportunity to change the outcome of their bombing. So we can go ahead and get these guys out of the way. Yeah, I guess we'll rebase them there. If we have Predalot perform the defensive HQ support, his 2 would subtract from Rundstedt's 4, leaving a net +2. That would round to +1. So that would really not be enough to stop the German. Further south, Biot is in the same situation with the 2. He's also not close enough to add any defensive HQ support. Georges, however, has 3 that he can provide. That would be reducing. That would reduce Rundstedt's differential to a +1, which would then round down to +0. So Georges will cancel out Rundstedt. We're looking at a 3-to-1, just straight up on the Blitzkrieg table. I'm wondering if the French, if they couldn't commit all of this artillery's ground support, because you can no more than double um, your defending strength or attacking strength through ground support. That would have been a total of 10 factors, 5 artillery and 5 from the air. There's only 9 defending in the hex. If they push it up to 18, it's still going to be a 3-to-1. It's not going to make that big of an impact. So for that reason, they have not committed that artillery to also providing defensive ground support. But what they have managed to do is drop this down to just a straight up 3-to-1 plus 0 on the Blitzkrieg table. And things are not looking terribly good for the Germans, particularly considering that they have basically blown through most of their offensive points. So now here comes the big die roll. And what we're looking at, in order to just take the hex, the Germans are going to have to roll at least a 5. And that's going to inflict a loss on the Germans. It's going to turn everybody face down, and it will result in merely a retreat of the defenders. In order to get a blitz result, they're going to have to roll an 8 or better. And in order to actually have everybody remain face up, they're going to need like a 9 or a 10. So this really is only about a 30% chance to be really successful here for the Germans. So big die roll here coming in the very first attack of the campaign in the West. They roll a very modest 4. That's not going to take the hex. What it's going to result in is no losses for the attacker and 1 loss for the defenders. So if we go back to the table here, or to the map, the French will go ahead and kill off the Belgian cavalry unit. Now, because the defenders did take more losses than the attackers, that is going to mean the remaining defenders are turned face down. So Praedelot goes face down, but really kind of a bit of a disaster here for the Germans. Rundstedt does have technically it's 4 reorganization points, but any land units that he reorganizes only cost half. So he will reorganize both of the units in his hex. He's going to be turned face down, however, because he provided offensive ground support. And we'll leave the other 3 here remaining face up. So he will have used on 1/2, 2 to 2.5 of his 4 reorganization points, and unfortunately that doesn't leave him enough to turn face up an aircraft, because the aircraft are going to be doubled since it's a land impulse. Air rebases, no air rebases really to speak of for the Germans, and again we just kind of did the reorganization there. So a very unsuccessful initial attack by the Germans. We'll see how the Democrats respond, but things are looking pretty good so far here in the West. Well, moving into the second round of impulses after a very disappointing start to the turn for the Germans. The weather, as much as I've talked about it being bad weather here in November, December, the weather roll was a 2, which means it's fine everywhere, and the impulse marker is only going to move up 1 box on the track after each impulse. So we'll start here in Asia with the Chinese. The only thing they really need to do is plug this hole here. There's not a huge threat because the Japanese are all face down here, but they do have the Chungking warlords, which they can slide north here just to fill that in. That's going to prevent the Japanese from maybe winning initiative next turn and being able to slide through that hole before the Chinese fill it with something. But other than that, the Chinese are content to basically stay where they are on the defensive, and we can now jump back over to Europe and see what the other Democrats are doing. Here in Europe, the Commonwealth is going to be doing a land impulse, while France is going to be doing a combined. So we'll start off with the naval portion, and France is going to be sailing a transport here from Marseille. out into Cape St. Vincent. They're sending it out to Senegal to pick up the nice white print militia that arrived as part of their reserves. But they won't be able to get them back to France until the end of January, February. With the naval stuff out of the way, we've got no ground strike or strategic bombardment. Rail movement, the Commonwealth is going to, what are they going to do? They've got, I think they're going to rail this garrison here over to Dover. And are they going to do any other rail moves in a land? They get a total of 2 rail moves. So yeah, I think they will use the other one to rail the Manchester militia. Where do they want to send them? I guess they'll put them here in London for now. That's going to bring us up to land movement. The French do have a couple of land moves here. They're going to move the Paris militia in here to reinforce Pré-de-la. So the Germans have seen this, the ground strength in this hex that they attacked go from 9 to 11. And then they'll bring up the garrison here, the 7th Corps, 1, 2, 3. They'll put them into the second line here. And the Allied defensive line continues to thicken and strengthen. Is there any movement that the Commonwealth needs to do? Not really. They've got several units overseas, a couple of them out in Asia and the Pacific that will have to be brought back into Europe here by their transports. So those have already pretty much all sailed this turn. I think that's going to do it for the Allied impulse, and that's going to bring us up to the Communist second impulse. All of the Soviet Union activity is going to be pretty much centered around the Caucasus here, just north of Iran. They are doing a combined, since they are still considered a neutral. They get there's no naval or air activities they'll be doing as far as strategic bombardment or ground strike missions, which means we can skip ahead to the rail movement step. They get 1 rail movement, and from Grozny they are going to rail in an infantry corps here to Baku. And now they get a total of, is it 5 or, yes, it's 5 land moves. And they'll use 3 of those land moves to get this stack here into the mountains. And is there any, actually they're only going to be able to move, they've got the oil, they'll spend a 10th. They get 1 of these for free, the first one for free, but the second oil-dependent unit is going to cost them a 10th, which is no big deal. They've got plenty stored in the tanks in Siberia, so we will go ahead and record that on the track. And once that's done, so they've got 9/10 over there, we'll see if there's anything else they want to move. And I don't think so. So we're going to skip right ahead to air rebases. They do have 1 air rebase. Again, some heavy bombers coming from Grozny, which are going to go 2, 4, 6. We can place them here in Baku. And no reorganization, so we will go ahead and finish up with the communists. There's nothing going on in Asia to really take a look at. So now we're back over to the fascist second impulse. We'll see if the Japanese have anything in mind, although I think from their attack earlier in the turn, they've got pretty much a big chunk of their forces turned face down. We'll take a quick look over here in Asia before we head back to Europe. Well, as expected, the Japanese really didn't do much of anything. In fact, I think the only thing they did do is slide the Taihoku militia out of Taihoku here in anticipation of the Marines at sea here rebasing into the hex at the end of the turn. Other than that, they've got the central portion of their forces turned face down, having seized the mountain hex here earlier. They really don't have any concentration of power elsewhere along the line to make anything approaching a remotely decent attack. So a quiet impulse for the Japanese. In fact, they may be probably done for the turn, which means this will probably end up being one of those really long turns where we've got 4 or 5 impulses of almost absolutely nothing going on. The USSR would certainly like to see a long turn because they are one of the few countries that are not only wanting to do something but able to do something. So that's it here for Asia. Let's go back to Europe and see what the Germans are doing and if the Italians are going to be doing anything either. Well, here we are back in Europe, and the German offensive in the West has gotten off to a disastrous start. Not so much because of the losses they've incurred. Frankly, they haven't lost anything on the ground, and the only thing they've lost in the air were some light bombers. But rather from the fact that they have burned through 13 of their offensive points and have failed to take a single hex. The only thing they've managed to do actually is kill a very weak Belgian cavalry corps. And that's just simply not good return on that kind of investment in offensive points. The big danger here, well, the big danger really in every WiFCE game when the Germans go west into France, is the Allies being able to build up a strong and, more importantly, in-depth defense here in Belgium and northeastern France. And you can see they've got a solid line here, and they've got just about an entire second line. This is the only empty hex beyond the front line right now. And over the next couple of turns where the bad weather should be kicking in here, the Allies are just going to get stronger and stronger. So the Germans cannot afford to dilly-dally or waste time. And I think we're going to see that the German decision last turn to not go ahead and declare war on Belgium while Belgium was still neutral and get the surprise and more importantly not allow France to bring Belgium into the war as an active ally may be perhaps the biggest mistake of the game. We'll see. If the Germans get bogged down here in the West and end up losing this thing, I think a very good argument can be made that that is the case. So the Germans are not quite desperate yet. They're borderline desperate maybe. They certainly are not going to let another impulse of fine weather go by without at least trying to gain something here in the West. And what they've decided to do is they're going to go ahead and they're going to attack here in the Ardennes. Now to do so, they're going to call in, I think it's von Bock up here from Holland, and he's going to come down. They're going to do some shuffling of their forces here. Remember, they are all still face up despite the unsuccessful attack because von Rundstedt was able to reorganize them. So they'll do some reshuffling here and try to get a somewhat decent attack mounted from these two hexes into the Ardennes here. The good news for the Germans is that the Democrats have expended just about all of their assets trying to hold on and stop the initial attack here. You can see both their headquarters are turned face down, and I believe both, nope, they do have the 105 millimeter artillery here, which is something the Germans are going to have to take into account. And in the air, the Allies still have the Belgian Air Force here. The Hurricanes up here on the coast at Calais are pretty much out of range, so they're not really going to be a factor in this attack. So we'll see what the Germans can come up with here. We'll go ahead and have them select a land action for this impulse. They will spend the oil for that, so we'll have them pay for the oil. It is 10/10 or 1 full oil point to fully fuel all of their units. And we have no naval activities, no port attacks or movement or combat. There's also no strategic bombardment. It's going to bring us to ground strikes. And in addition to the artillery here and the Air Force there, they do have Bilot here who could potentially lend some defensive HQ support to the attack there. So that's something the Germans are going to have to take into account. The first question is, are they going to bother doing any ground strikes, and if so, where? They do have two HE-111 bombers that are still face up and available to fly. The target hex is, unfortunately for the Germans, in woods there, which the force is going to have any tactical factors, which means ground striking that hex, they would need to roll a 1 to have any success. The bombers aren't very good. They just have a 2 rating each, but it might be worthwhile seeing if they could maybe turn the headquarters here face down, which would remove at least one factor from the equation and make the German attack a little more likely by hopefully getting a +1 on whatever odds column they end up reaching. So you know what, let's go ahead and let's do that. We're going to send 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These bombers would have they have a range of 4, but it's an extended range, so they could make it there, but to do so they would be having their tactical factor, which would be a 1. So now, rather than send them down there for a 1 at a shot at 1 unit, they would be able to have that same 1, but they'd be rolling against 2 units here, assuming, of course, that they're able to bomb and the Allies don't decide to intercept with the fighters they have there. But you know what? I think I said the Germans weren't desperate yet, but maybe they are a little desperate, because they are going to go ahead and bring those bombers in. Now the Democrats have a decision to make. They could intercept this bomber here with the Belgians' fighter there, but the fighter is actually a fighter bomber. As you can see, it has a 2 tactical factor, conceivably allowing them to fly as a bomber during the upcoming attack, which the Allies may or may not be expecting. But again, it's just a single factor. They do have some artillery there in case they need it, so I think they will. They'll have a decent chance here of maybe shooting down some more German bombers. So they are going to go ahead and intercept, which means the first thing we have is another small and probably quick air battle to resolve. So let's go ahead and do that first. I've moved the aircraft involved just off to the side here on an empty spot on the map board, and you can see we have a fighter stream and no bomber stream for the Democrats, and we have no fighters here and only a bomber stream consisting of a single bomber for the Germans. Now, since the Democrats are the non-phasing player, they will roll first. We have an air-to-air value of 3 to 1 for the Germans. That's going to be a +2 column for the Belgian fighters, and it's going to be a -2 column for the German bombers. So the Belgians, being the non-phasing player, will roll first. So we'll see what they come up with here, and that's not what they were hoping for. They ended up with looked like it was going to be good at first when I saw that 9 pop up, but instead it turns out to be a 10. On the +2 column is an AC. That is, the attacker clears through any one defending bomber, and since there is only one defending bomber, that means that the HE-111s are in fact going to get through. But before that happens, they are going to have an opportunity to shoot back at the Belgian fighters on the -2 column here. I don't expect really anything drastic to happen here. It's not a bad roll. It's a 7. 7 on the -2 is actually defender aborts. So had there been something else, had there been more German aircraft in the bomber stream here, they would have all gotten through too, as the fighters have to abort back home. But the air battle has gone the Germans' way. And now we can head back over. I'll return the Belgian fighters to base, and we can resolve not just this bomber's ground strike, but the other bomber's ground strike against the headquarters. All right, back on map. The Belgian fighters just returned to base here in Brussels. It seemed to be the I guess, the safest place for now, at least, for them to return, that they could reach in range, which means we're on to the ground strike. So we'll just go ahead and resolve the bombers that we just saw fight their way through. There are 2 units in this hex. As you can see, they're both infantry corps. That's going to be 1 roll against each of the units. The 2 tactical factors are going to be halved to 1, so I need a 1 to invert either one of them. It's a real low odds chance of anything happening, but I'll just roll both dice at the same time. The red die will be the top infantry corps, and the green die will be the bottom infantry corps, and we'll see if the Germans have any more luck with these ground strikes than they did last time. And oh, that's heartbreakingly close. 2 and then a 9. So no effect, kind of as expected here. It was just a shot in the dark. And we will return these to base here. And now we will roll the 1 ground strike against the headquarters there with the other bomber, needing a 2, like we just saw, or less to invert Billock. And wow, that got the job done. So a few low odds attacks, but they ended up paying off here. And now we will go ahead and invert him. We'll return the bombers to base. And next up will be land movement. I'm not going to bother you with the details of that. I'll go ahead and take care of that. And then we'll pick up with probably the land combat phase at that point. So I'll just summarize the land movements the Germans make here, and we'll go from there. So back in just a minute. Having done all of the rail movement, land movement, air transport, debark of land units at sea, invasions and paradrops, we are now up to the land combat step. And the Germans essentially did a kind of a major reshuffling here. They brought all the units that were in this hex and participated in the failed attack here. They slid them down here a hex. They brought von Bock in. They brought the artillery and the infantry corps that were in here down here as well. Moved some units further up. They shifted. I think they shifted their northernmost armor corps. Yep, they got them here. Moving slowly to the south. And now they're poised to make a second attack, and they're going to attack from these 2 hexes into the Ardennes here. And let me go ahead and move these aircraft units here so we get a better look and see what exactly is going on here. In this hex, the Germans have the 2 strength division. They have the 8 strength motorized as well as the mechanized. That's going to give them a total of 18 factors attacking from that hex. They've got 3 from the artillery, 7 from von Bock is 10, and 9 from the infantry is a total of 19. So 19 and 18 is going to be 37. The defenders have 2 5-strength infantry corps here, so it's 37 to 10 right now, which is tantalizingly close to 4 to 1, but not quite. First thing we're going to have to do is consider any ground support that either side is going to fly in for the battle, or bombard in the case of artillery. And I don't see any face-up bombers on either side that are going to be able to affect this battle. So no ground support from the air. The question for the French is, do they want to have this 105 artillery unit bombard? And it's got a 3 strength, which is pretty nice, especially for this stage of the war. However, if it were to provide some defensive ground support, it's firing into the forest. It's going to have its bombardment factor, and it's going to turn that 3 into 1.5. That's only going to increase the defense to 11.5, which would then round to 12. But 37 to 12 is also 3 to 1, just the same as 37 to 10. So adding the artillery unit would have no impact on the odds. And therefore, they're going to leave it face up and not commit it to the battle. Next is headquarters support. The Germans are going to use von Bock here, who is a 3. And unfortunately for the French, that last ground strike rolled very luckily and did managed to invert their last headquarters. So they're all 3 face down and unable to provide any defensive HQ support, which means the Germans are going to get all of von Bock's 3 divided by 4. That's 3/4, rounding to 1. So there will be a +1 for the Germans. Beyond that, I don't see anything that's going to affect the odds or the attack and defending strengths on either side. So it looks like we are at a 3-to-1 +1. Now, the Germans do have this mechanized corps here, which is enough to allow them to choose whether they want to use the assault table or the blitzkrieg table, and they are going to choose the blitzkrieg table. Again, the focus for the Germans right now, at least, is gaining ground and trying to push their way through the defensive wall that is forming rather quickly. So we're looking at a 3-to-1 +1 on the blitz table, which I think is actually slightly better than their initial attack last time out on that hex there. I think it was a 3-to-1 on the blitz, and that was using 13 OPs to do that. So we got 3-to-1 +1. It's still not a fantastic attack. In order to take the hex, which I think would be considered the bare minimum for this to be a successful attack, they are going to have to roll a 4 on the die, giving them a 5 total result. Even then, that's going to cost them one loss. In order to do anything noticeably better, they're going to need to get up into the 7 or 8 range, which means a 6 or 7 or so on the die. So really, while they have a 70% chance of taking the hex, they've really got about a 50%, maybe a little less than a 50% chance of actually doing something that might do a little bit more damage to the Democrats. So let's just roll it and see what happens. Yeah, that is a surprisingly good die roll. They rolled a 9, and with the +1, that becomes a 10. On the 3-to-1 table, or column of the blitz table, that's an *1B. So, good news for the Germans. All of their units will remain face up, except, of course, for von Bock. He'll be turned face down at the end of the combat resolution, at the end of the advance after combat, because of his offensive HQ support. But they are going to then kill one of the infantry corps, and they are going to blitz the other one, or shatter the other one. So one of these will be back in the cups, and one of them will return as a reinforcement next turn. I think this is the one that will go on the spiral, since they do have the ability to retreat. So we'll go ahead and place him over there, and the 5-3 will go back in the cups in the force pool. And now the Germans will need to advance after combat. This might be a little tricky, considering. We'll go ahead and slide the 9-4 there, and we've got to be careful. We can't leave this hex, or can we? These? No, see, we can't leave this hex open, because the militia would jump in there and destroy these aircraft that are based there face down. We have the same issue down here. We can't leave this hex entirely open. We know von Bock, maybe we'll leave him here since he's face down. And there's not much that the Democrats are going to be able to attack this hex with, as opposed to here. So what we may end up doing is, let's go ahead and bring these guys forward. I think we'll leave both of those there. It's not as aggressive an advance after combat as the Germans would like, but I think it will suffice, because we do have we've got one corps size unit face down in these 3 hexes, so there's not a huge counterattack that the Democrats could mount into the Ardennes here. And again, it is going to be protected by the river here on 2 of those hex sides at least. So the only thing that remains is any air rebases, which I think the entire Luftwaffe is now face down. So that's done. And then reorganization. I think the only 2 German land units that are face down are headquarters. So no reorganization either. That's going to wrap up the Germans' second impulse, where the attack went considerably better than the first time. I don't know. Certainly they didn't They didn't puncture the front. They did manage to take a hex, and that's, as we saw last impulse, that's, you know, nothing to take for granted. But if things continue like this could be a real long slog for the Germans, and that's not good. So let's go ahead and jump down and see what the Italians are going to be doing, and we also have to look at the Spanish nationalists. The Italians are getting an object lesson in what happens when you find yourself at war when you're unprepared. And the Italians are woefully unprepared right now to get into a full conflict with France, let alone France and the Commonwealth. So they are quite content to sit back for the moment and just wait for more arms to roll out of their factories, which means we can shift over here to Spain. And the nationalists will be able to take advantage of the full Italian activities limits. Now, granted, it is still a combined because Italy is neutral, but I don't think that's going to slow the nationalists down too much. There's no naval activity that they're going to be doing, but they are going to, I think, go ahead and do a ground strike mission. They've got their bombers back, so we'll go ahead and take care of or take advantage of the good weather here. The question is, attacking this hex or attacking Valencia. Valencia is the city. The defensive strength in both hexes is 8, so and they're both in mountains. So really, it's going to be 16 is going to be the modified defensive strength. There are 2 units in each of the hexes as well. Valencia has the taller stack here because it has the remaining Republican naval vessels. So the nationalists, looking things over, can get a 3-2 on the hex here, or they can get a 1-1 on Valencia itself, and that's prior to any ground striking or headquarter support, anything along those lines. And the question is, yes, they can. The 3-2 attack is better than the 1-1 attack, but the 1-1 attack would net them Valencia, which is the goal, at least in this portion of Spain. If the nationalists can take Valencia and Malaga, they will put an end to the civil war at long last. So do they try and shortcut things here with a 1-1? They will almost certainly find themselves on the assault table. And a 1 on the 1-1 is 3 attacker losses to no defender losses, whereas a 1 on the 3-2 is only 2 attacker losses, which is much more sustainable by the nationalists. They certainly have the upper hand now, but if they get a little careless and they start throwing away units left and right, there may be an opening for the Republicans to try and push back and maybe grab a little more productive capacity and start rebuilding their forces. So they've got to be a little bit careful about what they do here. Now, obviously, ground strike, a potential +2 would change things around a bit. In order to take Valencia on the 1-1, they would need to roll a 10. Very unlikely. Whereas taking the mountain hex southwest of Valencia would require a 9 or 10, and they actually will end up killing something where they've got a 50% chance of killing something. And remember, the Republicans are in a real bad way because they only have 2 build points, barring foreign help, which they're not getting again this turn. So really, just killing something at this point is a success for the nationalists. So I think looking at the tables a little more closely and understanding that at this point the war has been going on so long that taking some chances to try and end it sooner, it's not going to make that big a difference. So we'll go ahead and fly the ground strike here into the mountains. Of course, the Republicans are going to intercept that, which means we're going to have another big Spanish air battle here in over the mountains in southeast Spain. So let's go ahead and I'll pull the air units off and we'll resolve the battle, see how it goes this time for each side. As is typical here in Spain, the air battles are not very big. We have a Republican fighter stream of a single fighter with no bomber stream, and on the nationalist side, we again have one fighter and one bomber. Now, the air-to-air factor is going to be 4 for the nationalists to 3 for the Republicans. So, nationalists will be rolling on the +1 column, and the Republicans on the -1 column. But that didn't stop them last time out. Republicans are the non-phasing players, so they will roll first. They're looking for something really high or really low, and that is straight down the middle. And 11, that's going to, I have to look at it, that is a DC, that is defender, clears through any one bomber, so the nationalists will choose the only bomber they have in the battle and clear them through, which means they get one shot here on the +1 column. Let's see if they can clear the skies of Republican aircraft, and I think they may have done that. That's a good roll. A 5 is the total, and the 5 on the +1 is in fact a DX. However, it's a green box, which means the pilot survives in any case unless we are shot down in a sea area without a naval unit or a port, which is not the case. So the Cherries get a little bit of revenge on the Republican I-16s this time by shooting them down. The pilot will survive, and fortunately for the Republicans, these fighters are only going to cost them 2 build points. So it would be conceivable that we see these fighters back again in a couple of turns if the Republicans can hold out that long. Meanwhile, let's head back to the map to Spain, and we'll resolve the ground strike before we get into the movement and combat steps. As you can see, the nationalist fighters rebased here, and now we have the bombers, which are actually pretty good bombers, these SM-79 Italian bombers here. For this stage of the war, a 3 tactical factor is nothing to sneeze at. There are 2 units in the hex. I'll go ahead and roll both dice again. We'll have the red die be the top unit, the motorized corps, and the green will be the infantry corps underneath. We're looking for a 3 or less to turn them face down. And I think that's a roll the nationalists will be happy with, a 3 and a 7. Oops. That's going to turn the motorized corps face down. That's not a huge deal, but what it does do is give the nationalists a +1 in any potential attack coming up against this hex. So moving on from ground strikes, we've got rail movement, land movement. We get 3 land moves. This won't take very long, so I'll go ahead and keep this on camera. The Sevilla militia is going to move into the mountains there. The Guard infantry is going to slide down, and then finally we're going to bring 8th Corps in here. I'll go ahead and bring us on to the attack. The land combat step, and again, it's a 16. Actually, let me go ahead and just double check, make sure we've got all the calculations right, and then we will continue with the land combat because we have no air transport, debark, invasions, or paradrops. Okay, I've double checked the math. Everything is what I thought it was going to be. In the land combat step, we have 1 attack. It is going to be here in the mountains. The defenders, as we mentioned earlier, have a strength of 8, which is going to be doubled to 16. The attackers have 6 and 3 is 9. In this hex, they've got 2 and 5 is 7, plus 3 is 10, for a total of 19. The division makes it 20. That's 24. And this should be a 5 strength motorized corps for a total of 29, attacking 16. That is going to be good enough only for a 3-2 combat odds. We have no ground support for either side, and for HQ support, the nationalists will commit Franco with his 2, and I guess I'll leave him face up till after any advance after combat. And to respond to that, then the Republicans will commit Azania to prevent them from getting an additional +1. So with that, we're looking at a 3-2+1. The Republicans are going to choose the assault table, and in order to kill something, which is the nationalist goal right now, they don't mind taking losses themselves because they can replace them. What they're looking to do is to whittle down, just wear down the Republican forces. They are going to need to roll a they're going to need a 6 result or better, but they have a +1 due to the face down Republican motorized corps. So really a 5 on the die or better will do it. So about a 60% chance here. Let's see what happens. Obviously the Nationalists would love another great high die roll, and in this case they don't get that, but they do get what they were looking for. 5 + 1 is a 6 on the 3-2 column. It's actually 2 attacker losses to 1 defender loss. And what we'll do is we'll eliminate the blue division, and I think we've got a 3 in here. Let's see, there we go. And 8th Corps. So the Nationalists will eliminate those 2 units. Everything else will be turned face down, and the defenders will have to lose a unit as well. And rather than lose the motorized corps, they'll go ahead and lose just a regular infantry corps. And there is no advance after combat, so that is going to pretty much end the land combat step there. It's probably going to end most of whatever the Nationalists were planning on doing this turn. However, as you can see, even at a 2-1 loss here, I can tell you both of these Spanish Nationalist units will be rebuilt this turn, whereas this infantry corps is not coming back ever again without some foreign aid. So a successful, even if a bit costly, Nationalist turn here in November, December. And that we have no air rebases and there's no reorganization. So that's going to wrap it up for the fascists. And I don't think the turn can end yet. Indeed not. It is it goes up 2, but the number is still a 0. So for that, we will move on next to, I believe it's the communists. I think I misspoke just now. It's not the communist impulse, it is the Democrats' third impulse. I did roll weather, and the weather has turned nasty rather suddenly here. With an 8 on the weather roll, we're going to see snow in the Arctic and North Temperate, rain in the Med, fine weather in North Monsoon, which is expected, rain in South Monsoon, and fine in South Temperate. The marker will go up 2 boxes after each impulse, and there will be a +1 to the next weather roll. So what we'll do is we'll stay right here in Spain briefly, since the French are directing the Republicans still. And France is going to be doing a land impulse. They're not going to be paying an oil to the oil cost to fully fuel their units because there aren't that many. As a matter of fact, I don't think they're moving any oil-dependent units this particular impulse. And with it being a land impulse, that's going to give them an unlimited number of land moves. The Republicans are going to use one of those to move the cavalry from a reserve position into the front lines, replacing the infantry corps that was just destroyed in that last Nationalist attack. And you can see beyond that, we've got 2 units here. We have the 2 units in Valencia. Azania turned face down for having provided headquarters support. So another 4 attacks just like that last one, and the Republican enclave here around Valencia will be eradicated. Further north in France itself, I don't think they have any land moves that they'll be doing. Or I'm sorry, they don't have any rail moves that they will be doing. They are going to reinforce Biot's Hex, however, with the Leon militia. I think they may even slide the anti-tank guns over as well, at the risk of thinning out the Met's defenses. They have, that's a pretty strong garrison there in Strasbourg, but I don't know if they want to thin that out quite yet. They will, however, take this cavalry corps 2, 3, 4, 5 up to there, and they'll slide this infantry corps over. I think that's going to do it for the French land moves. The Commonwealth, doesn't really have a lot of naval activity to do. The Commonwealth doesn't have a lot of activity, period, to do. They've got everybody pretty much where they need them to be or where they can get them. Be nice to move this garrison division out somewhere. I don't think the Commonwealth really have much to do. So in that case, we're going to go from here straight over to China, where I don't expect we're going to see much of anything at all. And then let's go ahead and jump over there now. So we can see as we move eastward here, the Soviets have a small buildup going on down here along the Bessarabian border with Romania. We'll see if anything comes of that. Their main activity seems to be here in the Caucasus north of Iran for the moment. Out here in China, is there anything that the Chinese need to do, want to do, or can do? And I don't think so. They've got a couple of units for the Chinese. This is a pretty strong line down here with 2 units. Granted, that's just a division in this. It's only 1 army and 1 division, but having 2 counters, 2 units of any type in a single hex is a pretty strong position for the nationalists. This is their only weak spot. There's really nothing they can do there. There is no river there, but the Japanese units are all face down. So Chinese have some time. I think they are content to sit tight and wait for the new year. And in that case, we can move on directly to the Soviets. And again, what I'll probably do, I probably will do the Soviets off camera since they are still neutral. It's going to be a combined action type, and they're really just going to be reinforcing and moving some of their troops here in the Caucasus into a position to threaten Iran here. So I'll go ahead and take care of that, and I'll just show you how much or how little they're actually able to accomplish with this upcoming impulse in just a moment. As expected, the Soviets spent all of their actions really moving up some troops here to the border. Now they railed in another rifle army into Zhukov's hex here along the rail line. They then moved the mobile units here. These 2 hexes are actually in the Mediterranean weather zone, which is rain, so it cost 4 movement points to enter these 2 hexes. The armor and the mechanized armies here were able to spend 2 for 6. Zhukov moved in. The cavalry corps that's face up here in Baku has moved in as well. And that's about it for the Soviet activity. This is the first possibility of the turn ending. It can only end on a 1, so I'm going to go ahead and roll the die. We'll see what happens here. It is a 3, so the turn continues. I'll move up 2 more boxes on the track, and then we will get to the fascist third impulse. And honestly, I don't see a lot happening. Even though the Japanese have some good weather in the North Monsoon, they don't have many units down there. A lot of their stuff is turned face down. And as far as the Germans go, they're looking at snow. That's a -2 odds attack. So I'll take a look at this, and we'll see what, if anything, the fascists decide to do with this impulse. As expected, the Japanese really have nothing that they're going to be doing this impulse. They've got good weather down here like they were hoping for, but as you can see, they're pretty thin on the ground here, and the only units nearby are all face down. So the Japs are pretty much done for this turn, and that's probably, given the weather and the situation over in Europe, that's probably going to do it. I think maybe for the fascists, probably for this, for the balance of the turn. Or is it? Given the bad weather in the North Temperate Zone, one would have to be crazy, stupid, or desperate to actually make an attack with the -2 odd shift that snow imposes. But I think right now the Germans fit at least one of those categories, if not more of them. And as such, they are going to choose a land action. They are not going to pay the 10/10 oil to fuel everything, because I don't know that they're going to be moving necessarily a lot of oil-dependent units. So with the land action, we know there's going to be no naval activity, and the entire Air Force is face down, so there are there's no strategic bombardment or ground strike missions. They also have no rail movement. That's going to bring us up to land movement. And the Germans, like I said, see perhaps an opportunity that they may be able to take advantage of, maybe an error or a sense of complacency on the part, 1, 2, 3, of the French down here in Metz. That's going to do it, I think, for the land movement. Which brings us to air transport. There's none of that, no debark, no invasions, or paradrop. So we are all the way up to the land combat step. And taking a deep breath, the Germans are going to attack Metz, located here, from these 2 hexes. Now, the reason this is a risky attack is that both of those hex sides are covered by printed fort hex sides. What that means is all of the units from this hex and from this hex will have their combat factors thirded when they make the attack. So why are they doing this? Because that thirded is in addition to the -2 odd shift that they're saddled with thanks to the snow. So why are they doing this? Well, there is a single unit in this hex. Hexes without multiple units defending them are so much easier to take the hex than if you have just even 2 divisions in there, because it's a lot easier to get a result that kills a single defender than it is to get a result that kills 2 defenders or forces them to retreat or what have you. So let's take a look at this attack. The defenders have a strength of 3. They are in a city with a factory stack that will, I believe, give them a -1 to the combat resolution. But what are the attackers bringing? Well, in this hex, we've got 2, 8 is 10, plus 9 is 19. And in this hex, we've got 1 more is 20, that's 25, and 8 is 33. Now 33, I'm just going to leave the aircraft off to the side here until we finish resolving the combat. 33 thirded nicely ends up at 11. So the odds are 11 to 3. And the Germans would have desperately loved to have gotten just 1 more attack factor involved in the combat. But it's not to be. So 11 to 3 breaks down to 3 to 1. There is no ground support available to either side. There is some HQ support. Von Lieb, as a matter of fact, that's why Von Lieb is here versus the 6.3 or the 6.6 mechanized unit that could have given them that 12th point. Actually, I'm sorry, it would have been divided by 3. They would have needed at least 2 more factors, and I don't think that was in the cards anyway. But Von Lieb will at least be able to give them a +1, since there is no possibility of defensive HQ support. So we're looking at 3 to 1. 2 odd shift penalty for the snow makes it a 3 to 2. 3-2. Believe, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and double check because 3-2 is 2 columns to the left on the combat table. Question I'm going to look up is whether that 3-1 becomes a 1-1 or whether it's columns on the table. This will be important and we don't want to mess this up. So it's either going to be a 3-1 minus 2 odds shifts to a 1-1, or it's a 3-1, 2 odds shifts to a 3-2. It's going to be +1 for the headquarters, and I'll also double check, but I'm pretty certain that the factory stack will give the defenders a -1 because there are no engineers attacking, so they will cancel each other out. So we're looking at either a 3-2 straight up or a 1-1 straight up. Let me check that in the rule book here real quick, and then we'll get on to the resolution. That was a very quick lookup. Found the land combat die roll modifier table, and yes, the factory will give the defenders a -1, so that offsets the +1 from von Lieb. And the 3-1 odds, 2 odd shifts becomes 3-2. They actually give that as one of the specific examples there in the rule book. So we are now ultimately looking at a 3-2 straight up. No DRMs, and the French are going to definitely choose the assault table. Now what this means is the Germans stand a 30% chance of losing 2 units and not taking the hex. They have another 20% chance of just losing a single unit and failing to take the hex, which means they need to roll a 6 or better to kill the 1 defending unit and capture Metz. So this is, well, it seems like I've been saying this a lot lately. This is probably the biggest die roll of the game so far, and I have a distinct feeling that pretty much every attack from here on out, at least made by the Germans, is going to be one of the, this is the most important die roll. So let's see what we get here. It's essentially a 50-50 shot here to take the hex. And, oh, wow, okay. Well, that's going to make things interesting. That's an 8. And 3-2 on the assault, and 8. Well, that's exactly what the Germans wanted. There are 2 results on this column that give the attackers no losses, an 8 and a 10. So the result is no loss to the attackers and 1 loss to the defenders. So talk about a surgical strike here. That's very efficient rolling on the part of the Germans. So the Metz militia is going to be destroyed. The Germans will all be face down, but hey, who cares at this point? They have just breached the Maginot on the northern end, or the western end here, and now we need to advance into the hex. Now this will be the, I guess, a bit of the tricky part here. Which do we advance in there? I think we are going to not repeat the mistake of the French there. We're going to leave the division, since I turned them face down. We'll leave the division here with von Lieb, just in case the French infantry there in Strasbourg were to get any ideas. And what will we push? You know what? Let's go ahead and let's bring the mechanized guys in. And do we want to... they can bring 5 there. They've got a fully stacked hex here. Not a lot they can do attacking across rivers there. I think we're going to go ahead and take a chance here and bring the infantry division along with them. So that's huge. That's really big. Breaching that line. Obviously a mistake on the part of the French to slide the anti-tank unit out of that hex. Well, this has made things suddenly a lot more interesting. It's far from over. I will say that, because the French have a pretty good defense in this hex. The weather is bad. All of these German units are going to be face down, so any further German aggression this turn isn't going to happen. But they have pierced the Maginot. That's going to put the whole southern flank in danger now that they've got troops behind the defenses here, as well as having taken a red factory and a resource. So they're going to cut into the French production a little bit, and next turn this factory and resource will be cranking out goods for the Wehrmacht instead, since we do have a rail line running from here into here, although we may have to clear out Strasbourg before we can rail through there. If we actually, I don't think we have to, because the resource is in with the factory, so I think we'll be all right there. So big doings. Now we'll roll to see if the turn ends on a 2 or less. It is a 9. Boy, that die is hot right now. So the turn will continue with the Democrats. So the French will have a chance to react and try and stitch together their line again. It'll be interesting to see what they decide to do here. Well, what a disaster for the French. Just when it seemed like the Democrats had managed to stuff the Germans, they had at least one turn of really poor weather coming up, and thus some time to build up their strength not only on the ground but also in the air. They managed to allow the Germans to capture Metz here, and sealing this breach and trying to contain this is going to be their top priority, because it may not look like much, but the seizure of Metz here really kind of threatens the entire southern sector of the Democrats' front line here in eastern France. Fortunately, it's snow, so that's not going to hinder their movement, so they should be able to shift their forces into position to seal it up for now. But the problem is it's not going to be very strong, and certainly not going to be in depth. They're going to have to hope they get another couple of turns of bad weather that's going to impede the Germans to allow them to continue to turn out some more ground forces and air forces to try to solidify what is now a much longer line that they're going to have to defend. The weather, speaking of which, for this new set of impulses is even worse, considerably worse than last time. Well, I won't say considerably worse. It is worse. The die roll was a 9. With the +1 from the last weather roll, that gives us a 10 in November, December. That's going to give us blizzard in the Arctic, snow in both North Temperate and the Mediterranean, rain in North Monsoon, storm in South Monsoon, and then rain again in South Temperate. There will be a +2 to the next weather roll, and the marker is going to go up 3 boxes after each impulse. So chances of us making it around for another set of impulses this turn, I think, is not looking terribly good, because right now, after the end of this Democrat impulse, they can end the turn on a 3 or less. Now, I think, fortunately, at least as far as the Chinese are concerned, they're pretty set where they are. They don't need to do anything else. The Commonwealth, just some very minor things. I think what they may do is rebase the Hurricanes further south to get them more in a better position to where they can cover more of the front. And as for the French, they're going to have to do quite a bit of realignment here, shuffling some troops around again to fill this spot and to fill it with to turn it into a defensible position. Obviously, we've got the cavalry corps that can slide right in there, but that's not going to be enough to stop the Germans, or maybe not even slow them down. One of the big questions for the French is, do they continue to hold on to Strasbourg here? They've got, it's pretty well defended, and it still does have 4 hex sides that are protected by the Maginot Forts, as well as 3 hex sides from the river. If they do decide to start to pull units out of there, they're not going to be able to get them very far because of the zones of control exerted by these units here. So that's something they're going to have to look at. But I think what we'll do for the Commonwealth, they will do a combined. The French will do a land, as will the Chinese. And like I said, the Commonwealth has pretty much moved all of their naval units that they need to move. Those at sea will just simply return to base. So the only thing they're really going to do, and this is skipping ahead quite a bit to the end of the Commonwealth impulse, but they're just going to redeploy or rebase the Hurricanes a little further south there. For the French, we've got several land moves going on here. I don't think any of them are oil dependent units, so again, no oil expenditure required. And I'm not going to do all of the little moves on camera. I'll go ahead and take care of them here, see what kind of line we can stitch together, and then once the French have completed their impulse, and the Chinese really aren't going to do anything, so there's no reason to check in over there. We'll go ahead and I'll continue once we've reached sort of the end of the Democrat impulse. We'll know if the turn's going to continue, and if it is, then we'll move on to the communists. Well, the French were able to shuffle some things around and get to a much better situation than it looked like they were going to at first glance. What they've done here in the east is they've managed to just kind of shuffle the garrison corps that was here up into here, moving the stronger garrison that was in Strasbourg down along with this infantry corps here. They've managed to get the cavalry corps along with the Lyon militia in here for a total defense of 7, which isn't really great, but they were able to shift their artillery down here, which could conceivably turn this into a 10. That's a respectable defense, if not a really great one. And then they also they left the anti-tank guns there. They did bring down this 5-3 infantry corps 1-2-3 around here, putting them into Biot's hex. So they've got a 5. Biot is also a 5. That's 10. The AT guns make it a 12, and if any armor or mech attack them, it's actually a 14, which is a pretty good defensive strength for the Allies, particularly this early in the war. The problem with that is they've had to thin out these hexes right here, and this, of course, would be the hex corresponding to the crossings along the Meuse in the Sedan sector. And right now it's being held just by the face-down HQ. I think that's Georges. Let's see, who is that? That is, in fact, Georges. He's only got a 4 combat factor, although he does have a 3 reorg value. But the French thinking is the Germans only have a single hex they can attack into here from, and they already have a face-down unit in that hex, so there's no real threat this turn. Next turn, they will be receiving a couple of reinforcements, which are going to help out, and if they can prioritize rushing some units into there, hopefully they can win the initiative battle, or we just have really, really bad weather that keeps the Germans where they are through January, February. They should be able to build this central sector back up in some kind of strength by the time the good weather returns in the spring of 1940. Other than that, the Chinese did nothing. The turn end die roll was an 8, which means it does continue. So we moved the marker up 3 boxes, and now it's going to be the communist impulse. And the communists have, let's see, they've got a rail move that they're going to do. They're going to ship old Timoshenko here from the East Europe map, and they're going to send him to the neighboring map in Ashgabat. Again, it looks like they are slowly building up forces for a second front here on a possible future invasion of Iran. The rest of their land moves, they've got, I think it's a total, is it 5 or is it 6? I think it's 5 for the USSR. It is indeed 5 land moves. This is the Med here, so we can drop him there for 1, and then we'll jump back over to Europe here pretty quickly. It looks like the Soviets have essentially decided, let's see, this is north temperate, so that's only going to be 1, 2, 3. Question is, were they in supply? 1, 2, 3, 4. No, they were out of supply when they moved, so they're going to be face down, but they did make it to Odessa. These guys are also out of supply, but that's all right. Let's see, this is Arctic, or this is blizzard up here, so maybe we leave them where they are for the time being. And of course, they're going to continue to be out of supply, so maybe not. Let's go ahead, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4. We can move all of them, so we'll start to bring these guys back. And matter of fact, we'll get them to Kiev. We'll send the infantry and cavalry down here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are 5 land moves. and that is going to do it for the Soviets. The Soviet end of turn roll is a 4 or less, and they roll a 3. So the turn does end, and this is going to have a little bit of an impact on the initiative modifiers for next turn, because both the Democrats and the communists got an extra impulse, so this will help the fascists here moving forward. I'll go ahead and make those adjustments. For now, though, we'll get into partisans, U.S. entry, and then the return to base and final reorg, and then production. So we'll once I get all of the end of turn stuff taken care of, if anything interesting were to happen in these phases, I'll go ahead and pick that back up and put that on camera. But otherwise, we'll be running through the end of turn stage, and then I'll show you what everyone has managed to produce here at the end of 1939. Well, I've run through the end of turn stage, and before we take a look at what each of the major powers has built in the production step, I wanted to just mention one thing here. The Commonwealth had a couple of infantry corps here on transports in the North Sea that I missed. It's one of the dangers of big interruptions between filming sessions. And so in the last 2 impulses that the Democrats had, they would have been able to land the troops here at Calais, which is what they did, and then they were able to march the 7-3 and the London militia on into Belgium, which does certainly help bolster the central sector a little bit. I think they would prefer to get them into the front line here, but they are on their way up. Other than that, the partisan roll resulted in no effects anywhere, no partisans popping up anywhere. And U.S. entry, actually, we rolled once for Japan and once for Germany, now that each of those fascist powers are at war with Democrats, and the rolls were both quite bad. And as a result, the U.S. entry has actually gone down by 1 against both Japan and Germany. So those are kind of the biggest end of turn stage developments. I think we're ready now to go ahead and take a look at the production. The production totals for this turn are unchanged from last turn, even though France did lose a resource and a factory in metropolitan France that would have reduced, and actually technically did reduce, their production from 6 to 5. However, the defenders of Metz were destroyed in supply in their home country, which means the cadre rule kicks in, and that awarded the French 1 bonus build point for that. So that raised the total back up to 6. Now, even though the production, for example, among the fascists are 11 for Germany and Japan and 8 for Italy, USSR also produced 8. Commonwealth sits at 11. France is 6, thanks to the bonus build point. The US is at 10 and China at 5. Several of the countries had debt to varying degrees, which is going to reduce the amount of cash that they had available to spend on units. And unfortunately for the Democrats, the country probably that was most impacted by this was France itself. So we're going to start off looking at the fascist production as usual first. And we'll start with the Italians, who are training some pilots here, as well as building a single-engine fighter and a twin-engine land bomber. That's going to be a total of 7 for the Italians. The Germans are also training a pilot. They are building 2 single-engine fighters and 1 twin-engine bomber, and that's going to be a total of 9 for the Germans. And then finally, the Japanese, they are building a mechanized corps, which I think they are anticipating being able to give them better options here in China next summer. Along with that, they are producing a convoy point, and they are building the second cycle of the light carrier Chiyoda. They are also training a pilot, and they are building 2 carrier planes. That's going to give them a total of 11. Moving on to the communists, which in this case consists of the Soviet Union. They are building a pilot They are building an anti-aircraft gun unit, and they're building a single-engine land bomber. That's going to be a total of 8 for the Soviets. Now we move on to the Democrats, and we'll start with the French. And like I said, even though they produced 6, they were sitting at a deficit of 4, which only gives them 2 build points, which they use to build a single-engine fighter, which is going to simply replace the one that they lost this past turn. Next is the Commonwealth. They built an infantry corps. They also built a twin-engine land bomber, trained a pilot, and started the first cycle of a fleet carrier. That's going to be a total of 10 for the Commonwealth. The United States, actually let's look at China real quick. They had a total of 5, and they built a garrison corps as well as a cavalry corps for a total of 5. And then finally the United States, they also built a twin-engine bomber. They built a carrier plane. They are training a pilot. They began the first cycle of a battleship and first cycle of a transport, as well as bringing the USS Helena out of the construction pool to complete her sometime early next fall. And then finally we have the Spanish. The Republicans have 2 build points, but there is nothing in their force pool which is cheap enough to be built for only 2 build points, which means they were unable to build anything, while the nationalists are sitting on 11 build points, and that's enough for them to build an infantry corps and an infantry division for a total of 5. And that is going to wrap up production. It's also going to wrap up the November-December turn, which also wraps up the year 1939. So we've got some annual force pool additions coming for 1940. The German attack in the West looked like it was off to a horrific start, but the late turn attack to capture Metz has really sort of changed the situation around a little bit there. I don't think it's entirely disastrous for the Democrats at this point, but it is going to make it a little more difficult to keep the Germans out of Paris, I think. We'll see what happens here in the coming year, 1940. I do think that will be the make or break year for Germany, at least as far as the Western Front and France is concerned. If the Germans are still trying to reach Paris by the time 1941 rolls around, I don't think the game is going to end well for the fascists. I do have one last announcement. It's good news, actually. Turns out that we will not be using my copy of World in Flames at Winterfest here in about 4 weeks. Which means there's no need for me to tear down the game here. So this series will continue on, which I'm very happy about, because there's a lot, I think, that remains to be seen here. So for all of those of you who were hoping it would continue, it will in fact continue. Don't know the speed at which it will continue. Hopefully we'll get more than one turnout every couple months for you. We'll see. A lot of that will depend on some of the real world issues impacting my ability to film. But for now, that'll wrap it up, and we'll be back hopefully before Winterfest. We'll see. If not, I'm hoping after Winterfest, maybe in February, we'll get to the January-February 1940 turnout. So until then,